So good morning, class. I am your professor, Attorney Alfredo Lopez Mayol III. Wait. So before we begin, let us start first with a prayer. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Okay. Can you see in your screen, class, the presentation?
Yes, attorney.
Okay, thank you. So last time, class, we discussed the 4 topics method. And by the way, class, our YouTube community has increased. So now it only needs 20 students. So before we can reach our first 1,000 subscribers. So please share, class, the YouTube so that our community will increase. Okay? Share and subscribe.
Yes po, attorney.
Yes po,
Thank you. Thank you.
attorney.
Sure,
Support us.
attorney.
Being
Thank you,
attorney.
class. Thank you. I'm so happy my students are very kind, very good. Okay. So without further ado, let us begin. Our topic last time was all about the 4 topics method. Okay. So the 4 topics method discusses the different approach on how to deal with a specific medical situation, okay, or ethical situation, the different considerations, okay. So you are abreast with different concept, basically the 4 topics, okay. So we have discussed that last time. So today, different topic that we will discuss is the introduction to clinical studies. So we will be focusing on different key issues with regards to medical ethics, okay? On how to approach, again, certain issues, certain conditions. So we will be discussing first the concept of abortion, okay? When does life begin? Is it ethical to terminate pregnancy with a birth defect? We will also be discussing, do you have a right to receive treatment as a patient? And then when you talk with your doctor, is it ethical for her to withhold information from you or from your family? And then we will also be discussing birth control. Should it be available to minors? And then organ donation. Must a relative donate an organ to a sick relative? Okay. So these are the questions that would arise in these issues, okay? Medical issues with ethical considerations. So first, let's go to abortion. In the Philippines, class, abortion is a crime. Okay? It's a crime because there's a law prohibiting abortion. Okay, so that's the legal side of abortion. It is a crime. The religious side, of course, it is morally wrong. Okay, is forbidden by God. So, for all intent and purposes, for Filipinos, abortion is abhorred upon, okay? Frowned upon. I think most of the Filipinos are against abortion, okay? Compared to the millennials, they want abortion to be legalized, okay? However, in the other countries, because you have Julia's College of Medicine is composed of 50 nationalities plus for your information, okay? Most of the students are Indian nationals because the owner is Indian. So in this 50 nationalities class, some of their countries, abortion is legal. So when you say legal, they can perform abortion without violating the law. Okay? There are what you call medical abortion also. However, even though abortion in their country is legal, there are certain exceptions. Okay? For example, medical abortion, when there is danger to the life of the mother. Okay? When the child is no longer viable because of, for example, defect. Okay, so there are conditions that needs to be applied in order for abortion to be performed in their countries. Okay, so in the Philippines, there are proposals in Congress for a medical abortion, but it is still deliberated, okay, debated. So we never know, class, whether or not abortion will be accepted in the Philippines. So, medical ethics in abortion. Obstetrics is a specialty dealing with two lives, close link, whose interests may not always coincide. Okay? So, when you say dealing with two lives, it means the life of the mother and the life of the child. Okay? So, they are closely linked, but it doesn't mean their interests always coincide. So, for example, even though the mother is healthy, the child is sick. Okay, for example, there is already birth defect. Okay, anomaly in the child's genes. On the other hand, what if the child is healthy but the mother is sick? Okay, for example, um, pregnancy can induce what do you call this? High blood pressure. Okay, what's the medical term for that, class? I forgot.
Eclampsia, Doc?
Eclampsia, yes, that is correct. Okay. Of course, when you say if there is eclampsia, there are implications. It can cause stroke. It can damage organs. Okay, and so on and so forth. So these two conditions are being monitored by the obstetrician. Okay, so the welfare of both are primordial consideration. However, if one will endanger the other, then medicine will come in. Okay, so it's up to the doctor really. Abortion raises a lot of heat and dust during policy discussions. Like what I said earlier, in the Philippines, there are proposals for medical abortion. Okay? But the discussions, the debates, the deliberation is quite very high. Okay? The heat is high with regards to this topic. Especially Philippines is a Catholic country. So in some countries, elections have been lost on this issue. Okay. So when I say the Philippines is a Catholic country, it means that most of its inhabitants are Catholic. Okay, but it doesn't mean there are no other religion. Of course, we have our Muslim brothers and sisters. Okay, we have other minority religious groups. Okay, so there are many. However, the Philippines is a Christian-dominated country. That's why issues like abortion, issues like divorce, okay, more often than not, will take long period of time, okay, for its deliberations last. So Hippocrates considered termination of pregnancy as unethical. So Hippocrates being the father of medicine, okay? So in his mind, he believes that determination or abortion of a child is unethical. And time have changed and abortion has been accepted by many societies, the health of the mother being the most important consideration. Abortion is one of the most controversial issues in today's world. People tend to turn to the law, trying to decide what is the best possible solution to an unwanted pregnancy. Okay? So, when you say unwanted pregnancy class, it doesn't mean there is medical conditions or medical problem. Okay? It only means that the child was not planned. Okay? Was not planned. For example, a minor was impregnated. Probably, the minor was raped, and so on and so forth. Okay? So that's why the issue on abortion is very hot, a hot topic. Okay? Antagonistic relationship between the woman and her unborn child may occur. Okay? Especially when the mother is a minor. So whether fetus in utero has rights before viability is a subject of dispute and opinion. In any case, the embryo or fetus any age is protected by the Hippocratic Code. Okay? So like what I said earlier, class, Hippocrates is considered, okay, to be the father of medicine. Okay? And also, before you become a full-fledged doctor, the last step is taking the Hippocratic Oath. Okay? It is not the passing of the board exam class. Okay? When you pass the board exam, it will not mean anything unless you take the Hippocratic Oath because it is the last operative act in becoming a doctor. Okay? So that is why, for example, you pass the board exam. However, you committed crimes involving moral turpitude. So, the Board of Medicine will not allow you to take the oath, the Hippocratic Oath. So it means that you are still not a doctor, okay, for all intents and purposes. Okay. Under the Hippocratic Oath class or Hippocratic Code, there is this line, I will maintain the utmost respect for life from time of conception. Okay? Remember our discussion on the Code of Professional Responsibilities for Physicians? The right to life is the highest right. Okay? And in its preliminaries class, the right to life is being emphasized. Okay? Because it is the most important. Because as doctors, you deal with lives. So that is why you must respect life, uphold the sanctity of life, okay? Fight for the life of your patient, so on and so forth. So the right to life. So we have discussed also before that in the hierarchy of rights, okay, so in the Philippines there are rights, different rights, okay, right to information, right to privacy, right to livelihood, okay, right to property, and so on and so forth. So it is a hierarchy, okay, a staircase. So in the hierarchy of rights, the right to life is the highest, okay, is the highest right. It belongs to the top, okay. So every human has the inherent right to life. Right to life is inherent in a person, a human being, okay. So when you say inherent, it is basic class. Any human being will, if you are a human being, then you have that right. You don't need to perform anything to have that right. The fact that you are a living person, okay, you are a person, then you have this inherent right, okay? You don't have to do anything to have this right. Now, it begs the question, who is a human? Okay, so these are preliminary questions, class, because in other countries, a fetus is not yet considered a human. Okay, but in the Philippines, we have our own definition of who is a human. So when does a developing embryo become a person? It is extremely difficult to draw a line and say that the developing zygote or fetus become a person from a particular time. The fertilized ovum has within it all components needed for the growth and development into full person. Damages are claimed if an injury is caused to the fetus in the womb. It would mean that that the fetus is a person. Can the life of a person be ended by procedures by others? Okay. So in the Philippine settings, class, even though the child is not yet born, he is already considered a person for all intents and purposes. Okay. So by being a person, even though the child is still within the womb of the mother, he can perform legal acts already. For example, he can receive donation. Okay. So, for example, your grandfather is a wealthy man, and because the grandfather was very happy that her child is already pregnant with his grandchild, then he will make a donation. Okay, so because I love my grandchild, I will donate 100 million to his name. Donation. What if the child dies? Okay, before he was born. Okay, so that donation is already perfected class. So it becomes already part of the estate of the child. Okay, so that's the fiction of law here in the Philippines. There are conditions, class, when a child is already considered a person. Okay, so some people have interpreted that the developing fetus can be considered a person when the fetus is viable and capable of independent existence if removed from the milieu of the uterus. The period is progressively being reduced due to advances in medicine. Others have stated that the developing embryo can be considered a person when the brain starts developing, drawing the analogy of the brain death. Okay, so in different countries, class, in different setting, okay, they have their own law on when is a child considered a person. Okay, some like in the Philippines, even though the child is still in the womb, it is considered a person, but others they consider a a person a fetus a person if it is already born. Okay? So this is a significant moral consideration. There is a difference between killing or destroying something and preventing something from coming into existence. Preventing something coming into existence denies a future of value, as does destruction. Okay? So that is why, class, this issue is very controversial because even though there are medical conditions, say for example, the child's heart is defective before he was born, but in the Philippines, we do not practice abortion. Okay, we do not practice euthanasia. Okay, so if you terminate the life of the child, so it is considered a crime here in the Philippines. So the child, okay, in the Philippines, even though he has a defective organ, should suffer until his natural end. Okay? So that is why many people also, millennials, are proposing for a medical abortion. So people tend to turn to the law when trying to decide what is the best possible solution to an unwanted pregnancy. Okay? In the Philippines, the law, okay, leans towards the right to life. Okay? Abortion is one of the controversial issues discussed in medical ethics. So the opponents of abortion argue as follows. Okay? So a fetus has to be regarded as human being. Okay? So these are their arguments, okay, for the anti-abortion campaign. A fetus is human. An innocent human being, the termination of life is morally wrong. Abortion is an example of killing and terminating a human being's life. So being engaged in aborting is morally wrong. Okay? If one is adamantly opposed to abortion, one is committed to some set of values. Okay? Like what I said earlier, class, the Philippines is a religious country also. Okay? So, for some, they believe that if they oppose something wrong, then they are person of values, okay? Righteous. They are righteous, which requires that women who become pregnant, whether intentionally or unintentionally, must endure the process of pregnancy and birth, no matter how distressing, painful, and risky it is for them. The justification given for this is usually based on an abstract notion of the value of fetal life. Okay, so in the Philippines, we give a tremendous amount of value to life. Okay, as integrated in your professional responsibilities and other laws. Okay, even in the revised penal code, there are sanctions. Okay, criminal sanctions, administrative sanctions, civil sanctions, okay, the as against the abortionist or any persons who participate in abortion, rather than on the ground that suffering is morally improving for the women concerned. Extreme opponents of abortion argue that abortion is equivalent to murder and that no matter how much women may suffer, they cannot be allowed to kill their children. Okay? So these are the anti-abortion individuals. Termination of pregnancy brings out conflicts of right between two persons, the right of mother and the right of the child in womb. Okay, so like what I said earlier, there are two parties in this. Okay, the mother and the child. and they have their own corresponding rights also, class. Has the mother right to have the child in the womb destroyed? Does that unborn child have right of life? Has the doctor's right to kill the child in womb at the request of the mother? So these are the ethical questions that would arise, class, if you are met with this situation. Excuse me for that. Next, let us discuss aborting a malformed fetus. So parents have a desire to have a child of a certain quality. Okay, of course, if you are the mother, of course you want your child to be the best version of himself or herself. Okay, so bringing up the child with disability can cost money and use up resources. Congenital anomalies contribute a significant proportion of infant morbidity and mortality. Okay, so when you say morbidity, it connotes sickness. Okay, mortality, it connotes death, as well as fetal mortality. A debate regarding aborting a malformed fetus still exists. A congenital anomaly is defined as an abnormality of structures, function, or body metabolism that is present at birth and result in physical or mental disability or is fatal. Okay, so when you say disability, class, it means that when the child, upon its formation, there is already a problem on his physical development. Okay, for example, a congenital heart defect. Okay, an orofacial cleft. Okay, a down biopsy. Okay, not neural tube defects, and then several prenatal diagnostic procedure have been introduced. So these are the example of the defects, class. Okay, these defects can be known when before, I think, 4 months upon pregnancy. There are tests that the doctor conducts in order to know this defect. Okay, for cytogenic, one test is chorion biopsy, amniocentesis, and follicle synthesis. Okay, for the physical, ultrasound, 2D or 3D, and then ultrasonography with Doppler. Okay. You will appreciate this class when you reach your topic on maternal and child. Okay. So we will just make a rundown class because I am a doctor. I am a juris doctor class. I'm not a medical doctor. So more often than not, my knowledge is just limited, though I have a working knowledge with medical side because I used to be a nurse, class. Okay, I am an ICU nurse in Vélez College before, Vélez Hospital before, because I graduated in Vélez College. And then I am also a licensed nurse in New York State. Okay, so when there was retrogression, I studied, actually first I wanted to study medicine because of my background being an ICU nurse. Okay, and then most of my classmates are doctors. Okay, actually most of my classmates are consultants in the different field. So they encouraged me to teach because in their mind, I can teach the legal side of medicine. Okay, so that's why I'm here teaching my beautiful and handsome students. Okay, so we will just make a rundown class of the different tests and medical conditions of children But you will have an in-depth discussion with regards to this one later on in your study of medicine, okay? Maybe in obstetrics, in your subject obstetrics, okay? Maternal and child. So these are the conditions class, okay? Although making the diagnosis antenatally through recent advances in ultrasound and prenatal testing is important, providing information to make an informed decision of whether to continue or interrupt a pregnancy is quite crucial. Okay? So, history taking class, though it is non invasive procedure because it's just a mechanical act of taking history, it is important because more often than not, these conditions class are genetics, okay? So when you say genetics, it can be inherited from the parents or the grandparents. So you must brush on your investigative skills as doctors, okay? So a review of studies by Alalian et al. Found overall termination rates following antenatal diagnosis of congenital malformations are as follows. Okay, so these are applicable in other countries class. Okay, in other countries, more often than not, the following conditions are the reasons for abortion. Okay, Down syndrome 92%. Spina bifida, 64%. Anencephaly, 84%. Turner syndrome, 72%. Klinefelter syndrome, 58%. Okay? Moreover, late termination of pregnancy for fetal abnormality is permitted on differing grounds in different countries depending on the type of malformation, the gestational age at diagnosis, and then the law of that country. Okay? So severity of structural anomalies directly correlated with abortion rates of anomalous fetuses. The prenatal ultrasound at 18 to 20 weeks can detect major structural anomalies in approximately 60% of such cases. So in addition, it is recommended that ultrasound examination should be repeated to assess the evolution of anomaly and attempt to de-identify anomalies not previously identified. Okay? So in other countries class, because they have advanced technology, so they can detect these abnormalities ahead of time, okay, compared to ours. Actually, our law would need to evolve also based on the current technology that we have. Okay, so maybe later on when the lawmakers are already their mind are open, okay, they can amend laws that would also help the quality of life. Okay, because though our law right now protects life, but it is absolute. Okay? So what if that person is defective already? Okay? So is it not human to terminate the life of that person? Okay? So these debates have been going on ever since. Okay? So once a fetal structural anomaly is identified by 2D ultrasound, the Genetics Committee of the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada recommends that other imaging techniques such as fetal echocardiography, 3D obstetrical ultrasound, ultrafast fetal magnetic resonance imaging or MRI, and occasionally fetal X-ray and fetal computed tomography scan using a low-dose protocol may be helpful in specific cases. Okay, so these are the barrage of test class conducted in order to identify abnormalities. Okay, so in the Philippines, we have this technology also. However, compared to other countries, the Philippines is very far behind, okay, considering we we are what is the meaning third world. Okay. How about you, class? Do you know the meaning of the third world country? So, moving forward, parental blood testing and invasive prenatal testing may also be required to clarify the diagnosis for a fetus with isolated or multiple structural anomalies. Information regarding the abnormal ultrasound findings should be delivered to women in a clear, sympathetic, and timely fashion and in a supportive environment that ensures privacy. Okay? So what we seek to justify is availability of choice to pregnant women to prevent the creation of disabled people by aborting people. Okay? So these are applicable in other country class. Okay? So that's the issue there. Okay? That we need to address. Should we continue a life of suffering to a child, considering that this child has all these defects? Okay? Or should we endanger the life of the mother, considering that the mother is at risk of dying if the child is delivered because of certain medical condition? So these are the questions, class. Part of deliberations, part of medical ethics, okay, part of legislation that needs to be considered. Okay? That's why as medical doctors, even students, you can petition or join the deliberations in Congress. You can make a letter, okay? You can make a group, okay? And then make a petition to the lawmakers, okay? A position, explaining your position, and so on and so forth. Because everyone has the right to be heard also, whether you are a professional, whether you are a student, okay, or whatever walk of life you are in, you have the right to be heard. Okay? So now, let's go to another issue, which is patient's right. Okay? The patients to be treated or not to be treated, okay, and so on and so forth. So, question, do you have the right to refuse treatment? Okay, if you are the patient. So, the patient has the right to refuse medical treatment or procedures which may be contrary to his or her religious belief, subject to the limitation described in the preceding subsections, provided that such a right shall not be imposed by parents upon their children who have not reached the legal age in a life-threatening physician or medical director of the facility. Okay? So, a patient class has the right to refuse a treatment. Okay? What is the classic example? For example, class, during operation, okay? So during operation, the job of the doctor, preliminary job, is to inform the patient of the pros and cons of the operation, okay? So the doctor should provide health teachings to the patient. So if the patient is amenable to your proposals or to your teaching, and he agrees to undergo the operation, then he needs to sign the informed consent form. Okay? So the purpose of this is two-way class. Okay? For the patient and for your protection as doctors. Okay? So always have this informed consent class. Okay? Never perform any invasive procedure without this informed consent because your license can be removed. This is very strict. So a doctor has a three-pronged liability in a malpractice suit. Okay, so what are these three-pronged liability? First is the administrative liability. So when you say administrative, it's about your profession. Okay, so your license can be removed or suspended or canceled. Okay, depending on your on the gravity of the offense. Next liability is the civil liability. Okay, for example, the patient died, so you paid moral damages, actual damages, exemplary damages, and so on and so forth. The last liability is the criminal liability, where you will be imprisoned. Okay, so these are the three-pronged liabilities of a medical doctor. So every person has a right to health and medical care corresponding to his or her state of health without any discrimination and within the limits of the resources, manpower, and competence available for the health and medical care of good quality. In the course of such, his or her human dignity, convictions, integrity, individual needs, and culture shall be respected. Okay? So that's the core reason of the right. Okay? The respect of human life. Okay? Remember in the Code of Professional Responsibility, in the first provisions, respect to human dignity, respect to life. Okay? So that is why class, the core of this right is respectability. You need to respect your patients because they are humans, okay? Just like you and me. Their welfare should be your primordial consideration. Okay? So if any person cannot immediately, necessary he or she shall, depending on his or her state of health, either be directed to wait for care or be referred or sent for treatment elsewhere where the appropriate care can be provided. If the patient has to wait for care, he she shall be informed of the reason for the delay. Okay? So the patient has the right, class, every right to participate in the treatment modality. Okay? Um, some religious or some religious group, class, for example, I forgot what religious group, where they will not accept blood transfusion. As doctors, you cannot impose your principles to others. So when you talk with a doctor, is it ethical to withhold the information from you or your family? So another ethical consideration, class, okay? The withholding of information. Okay, is it ethical? So ethically, it is not acceptable to withhold medical information to patient or from the patient's family. So patient's class has also, they have the right to information, okay? To know their disease, to know their treatment modalities, and so on and so forth. As doctors, it is necessary to learn how to handle any kind of situation when it comes that doctor has to convey the difficult situation. Okay? For example, class, when I was a nurse in Vélez Hospital, I am like the messenger of death. Okay, the messenger of death, because every time a patient dies, the doctor will say, yun, yun na, tell the SO, the significant others, that their family member has died. Okay, so I am the ones who will communicate that information, because of course I'm assigned in the ICU nurse, ICU area. So more often than not, people there die. Okay, after performing emergency at first it was hard really to read faces in the image. But as you grow older, you realize that it's part of life class. Okay, so you must get used to it. Okay, so handling the situation is a must for the physician since he can't leave the patient as she is in a medical need or emergency. That's what's the critical part. Okay. So in a situation class, when you are a doctor, you are the leader of the medical team. Okay, so you must handle the situation. You must be competent. That's why you need to improve all the time your skill, your knowledge, your attitude. Okay, it is incumbent upon you to have high skill and high knowledge and good attitude because of your profession. Okay, so in case of holding the information, doctor has to face the consequences later on. Okay, so as you can see in the pictures, the doctor is holding the hand of the, maybe this is the significant others, okay, or the patient. The doctor is about to give a very critical information. Okay, so in the picture in the right, the doctor maybe is delivering a good news to the family and the patient. Okay, so there is a principle of autonomy inculcated in this right to information. Okay, a person should be free to perform whatever action he or she wishes, regardless of the risk or foolishness as perceived by others, provided it does not impinge on the autonomy of others. So we have discussed that being the principle of autonomy being part of the four pillars, okay, of the practice of medicine. Truthful and open communication between physician and patient is essential for the trust in the relationship and for respect for autonomy. Okay? Withholding pertinent medical information from patients in the belief that disclosure is medically contraindicated creates a conflict between the physician's obligation to promote patient welfare and to respect patient autonomy. Okay? Remember, class, in the code of your professional responsibility, you are beholden to your patient. Okay? So you must respect, okay, promote these rights of your patient. Okay? Principle of autonomy again. Person should be able to exercise the capacity for self-determination. A person should be well-informed. Okay? Remember the doctrine of informed consent? There is a three-pronged liability if you fail to perform this doctrine. And then a person must give consent to the procedure. Okay? Absent any this condition class, there is prima facie violation of this principle. Okay? So when you say prima facie, it means in its face there is a violation. So when undermined by nature or nurture, mental instability or drug addiction age, when a danger to self or others. Okay? So these are the exception class of the principle of autonomy. So if the patient is not of sound mind or in case there is emergency, okay, you can override this right. Okay, but only in certain conditions. Okay? Now, another issue, okay, is the birth control. another sensitive issue because it's like playing God again. Okay, you how do you call this? You affect the natural cycle of birth. So should it be available to minors? Okay. Another issue is should birth control be available to minors? Okay. Considering that minors right now they age for example in the United States, can you observe that their minors are like grown women? Okay. So I think it's still a case-to-case basis class. So we will just focus here in the Philippines. So birth control that work the best to prevent pregnancy are the implant and intrauterine device. They are also the most convenient to use and most foolproof. Other birth control method like the pill, the ring, the patch, and the shot are also really good at preventing pregnancy if you use them perfectly. Okay? So we will just make a rundown of the concepts here, class, because you will be discussing this again in your subject, maternal and child. Okay? So these are the different birth controls: oral contraceptive, like Depo-Provera, contraceptive patch, contraceptive ring, IUD, implant, cervical cap, male condom, to prevent sperm from reaching an egg, known as the barrier method, methods that prevent ovulation, and methods that prevent implantation of a fertilized egg into the uterus. Okay? So birth control. 18 who seeks emergency contraception because of forced or unanticipated intercourse would need approval, even though emergency contraception must be used within 72 hours of unprotected intercourse. Okay? Birth control used for birth control pills are used to treat irregular periods, cramps, acne, PCOS. Okay? So some medicines in birth control class are not really to control the or to prevent pregnancy. But some of these also helps conditions like cramps, PCOS, okay, endometrios, and other conditions. Taking birth control pills does not change a women's fertility as ovulation returns to normal when the pill is stopped. It's safe for teens to take birth control pills. Okay? So, in the Philippines class, if there are physiological anomaly like PCOS, okay, maybe the minors can take this pill as medical treatment or part of treatment modality. Okay, can you turn off your microphone, class? Can you still hear me, class? Hello?
Yes, attorney.
Yes, attorney. Yes.
Okay. Can you turn off your microphone because I hear a ringing. I think someone is calling. Okay. Thank you, class. Now, let's go to another sensitive topic, organ donation. Okay? So, question, must a relative donate an organ to a sick relative? So, in the Philippines class, there is what you call the Organ Donation Act. Okay? If you will observe, if you can observe in your driver's license, there is a check mark if you consent to organ donation. Okay, so for example, there's an accident, you are into accident, okay, and then your organs can still be used by others, then they will just look at your driver's license, and then if there's a check mark, then the doctor can remove. So it means that you have consented to the for your organs to be donated. Okay? So, the Organ Donation Act of 1991 is an update from the 1949 Act of legalizing the use of human organs. So, under the new legislation, each individual can donate all or any part of his body by way of legacy or will. The members of the family may also authorize such donation in the absence of contrary intention by the decedent. Donations are only valid when made for therapy, research, or medical education. International sharing of organ is recognized but subject to the approval by the Department of Health. Regulations are about to be formulated in order to implement the act, which will be largely publicized to encourage donation. Okay. However, class, this act or law is very sensitive. Okay, due to the very rampant human trafficking. Okay, if you have read some articles, human trafficking class, especially minors, they are being kidnapped. Okay, especially incest. Okay, so there are many polos. We will hire you as domestic helper in Hong Kong, and we will pay you 100,000 per month. Of course, if you are living in a province and your living is poor, you will be enticed. Okay, but when you go abroad, your organs will be farmed. Okay, so in the world market, in the world class, it's a very easy business by the billions. Okay, the income per year is billions of dollars. So that's why many persons right now are being protected. And even myself, I am an advocate of anti-human trafficking. Okay, I am a staunch supporter class of anti-human trafficking. Okay, especially children. So that's why we need to reconcile this law, okay, update it again in order to address the human trafficking of persons. So the healthcare and professional patient relationship. The relationship established between patient and healthcare providers is fiduciary in nature, which means that it is based on trust. So before, in our preliminary discussions, we have established that the sorry, I combined patient and relationship. So the relationship between patient and doctors is fiduciary in nature, okay? When you say fiduciary, this relationship is based on trust and confidence, okay? So in this respect, it is similar to the relationship between lawyers and clients or between clergy and their congregation. So whatever you say to your doctors, just like whatever you say to the lawyer, like myself, they are protected information class. And you can sue us as professionals if we break this fiduciary relationship. Okay? The professional trust the patient or client to disclose all information that may be relevant to his or her condition or illness and to be truthful while disclosing it. In return, the patient or client trusts the healthcare professional to maintain high standards of competence, to protect the confidentiality of private information, and to carry out his or her work in the best interest of the patient rather than taking advantage of the patient's vulnerability. Okay? Classic example class. Example, you have HIV, okay? And you, of course, when you have this condition, you need treatment. So, of course, you need to find a doctor for your treatment modality, okay? Or your treatment regimen, or your treatment program, and so on and so forth. So, when you confide all this sensitive information to the doctor, so when you went out to his or her office, there are pharmaceutical companies texting you of the different drugs of for HIV. So right there is a breach of the confidentiality doctrine. Okay? Because the relationship between doctors and patients are fiduciary. So they cannot divulge any information class. And if that happens, you can sue. Okay? You can file a case against that doctor. Okay? So honesty, the healthcare and professional patient relationship. So in a fiduciary relationship, it entails a little an amount of honesty class. Okay, not a little but an ample amount. So there is an element of honesty in this relationship. The professional does not withhold necessary information from the patient or lie to the patient about the nature or seriousness of his or her condition. Another, there's an element of beneficence or doing good, okay, part of the four pillars. There is an element of justice, okay, an element of avoiding conflict of interest, okay. So in doing good, the professional uses his or her knowledge and skill to balance good results and potential harms and act in the patient's best interest, okay. So in justice, the professional does not refuse treatment on basis of patient's race, religion, nationality, income, or other personal characteristic. Okay? So the four pillars class plays a vital role in this fiduciary relationship. Okay? Next is avoiding conflict of interest. This principle means that the professional must not benefit personally from his or her professional actions or influence. For example, a physician should prescribe a particular medication because it is the best choice for the patient, not because the professional owns stocks in the company that manufactures the drug. Okay? Just like what I said earlier. Pledging to do no harm or the doctrine of non-maleficence. This principle means that the professional must avoid actions detrimental to the patient. Okay? So we have discussed this. Right to life being the highest right in the hierarchy of rights is a term that describes the belief that a being has the right to live and in particular should not be killed by another entity including the government. Okay? So this is a balancing act class. Because though the right to life is the highest right, what if this person committed a heinous crime, okay, that justifies the termination of life? That's why we have a lethal injection. But right now, lethal injection is being suspended because of the principle of the right to life. Okay? So the concept of a right to life arises in debates on issues of capital punishment, war, abortion, euthanasia, police brutality, justifiable homicide, and animal rights. Okay? Excuse me, class. So, death penalty violates the most fundamental human right, the right to life. Okay, that's why death penalty is being suspended right now. However, for B class, death penalty should be revived. Okay, because if you commit something, the punishment should be commensurate also. Okay, if you killed a life, then your life should be killed. Okay, for me, as a lawyer class, I am a believer of absolute right. I mean, absolute justice. Okay? Absolute justice. So, it means simply that if you remove the teeth of your opponent, then your teeth should also be removed. Okay? So if you remove the life of someone, then your life should also be removed. Okay? Absolute justice. But of course, all this should undergo due process because we are a government of laws and not of men. Okay? So due process would play a vital role in this. So deprive, so death penalty, they said, deprives people the right to life. Question, is this penalty justified or should it be abolished? For me, it is justified, class. Okay? So right to life, arguments that support death penalty, prevents convicted killers from killing again. Okay? So in a way, this is a restorative justice. It prevents other criminals to commit the same crime. Okay? Maintain justice, and then historically it is recognized. Okay, remember in the olden times, so if you commit a crime, you will be hanged or your head will be cut. Okay, remember at the time of the kings and queens, where there's a very sharp object that will fall and then your head will roll. Okay, I forgot the name. Garote, is that garote? Okay. On the other hand, people against death penalty, they argue that it is not proven to deter crime, more expensive than imprisonment, does not bring closure, and so on and so forth. Okay? Police brutality. So, is legally defined as a civil rights violation wherein officers exercise undue or excessive force against a civilian. This includes but is not limited to physical or verbal harassment, physical or mental injury, property damage, and death. Okay? So right now, not all, okay, there are police officers who abuse their being a police officer. But I'm not saying all. But really, class, the answer to this is the administrative liability, the three-pronged liability of a police officer also. Actually, the three-pronged liability class is applicable to um, all professions. Okay, not just the doctors, administrative, civil, and criminal. Okay, so they must strengthen in their organization this three-pronged liability in order to deter those ninja cops or what you call this abusive police officers. Okay, so in their command as an organization, they must strengthen the penalties maybe or their procedure, their grievance machinery. Okay, for these earring caps. Okay, the right to life. Example, shoot to stop. Okay, so there are orders, shoot to kill orders, shoot to stop orders. Okay, and so on and so forth. Right now, war on drugs. Excuse me, class. So war on drugs. Some police officer, they justify their action because of the war on drugs. Okay, a killing, for example, a killing of the innocent as collateral damage. Okay, so for me, class, there is no, it is not wrong to wage war on drugs, but how they conduct the operation, they must improve, okay? And the three-pronged liability must also be imposed so that police officer will be scared to violate also. Did you know, class, police officer should be afraid of planting, for example, some police officers, they plant drugs to to individuals, okay? But in the dangerous drugs law, the penalty of that is death. Okay, if it is found that they plant drugs to innocent individual, the penalty of that class is death. So police, I think police officers doesn't know that. Okay, but if they know that, of course, naturally they will be afraid to plant evidence. That's why for me, there's no problem on whatever program the government um, imposed. Okay, what is essential is the implementation or the operation of the liability standards. Also, the three-pronged liabilities should be strengthened. Okay, because the intent of the war on drugs for me is very for me, class, personally, is one of the best action the government has done. Because, of course, I am a lawyer. The changes, class, of the citizens, it can be felt. Crimes were lessened. Notorious people got scared. Okay? Unlike before, compared today, okay, for me personally, when the next president will be elected, I hope he will continue the program against drugs because it's very successful. Okay, remember there are many crimes being performed because the people are crazy due to drugs. I don't know if you've heard. I think 2 years ago, there's a girl, a minor girl, being peeled. The face is being peeled and thrown in Lapu-Lapu. If you can still remember that, gikuan ang naong sa bata, murag saging, unsa tawagan ng kuan, class? Murag saging ba? Gipil. Buang to. So, of course, unsa may kuan. So, what's the reason? Drugs, of course. So, that's why we need to continue that program. Okay? Hello, class. Can you still hear me?
Yes,
Class?
attorney.
Yes, attorney.
Can you turn off the microphone, your microphone, class? Because I can hear interference. Okay, thank you, class. Okay, so let's proceed. Right to life. Okay, firearms should not be used except when a suspected offender offers armed resistance or otherwise jeopardizes the life of others, unless extreme measures are not sufficient to restrain or apprehend the suspected offender. Okay, to prevent a particularly serious crime involving a grave threat to life, to prevent a person resisting arrest from escaping where he or she is about to commit a particular serious crime that involves grave threat to life. Okay? And then shoot to kill, a suspect is honestly believed to be on the pulling the trigger of a firearm aimed at a hostage head or about to detonate a bomb. It asserts that the intentional lethal use of force is not strictly unable to protect the life, to protect more lives. Okay? So the right to life class can be countered if this situation arises. So these are the exception class, okay, of the right to life. Justifiable homicide, the killing of a person in circumstances which allows the act to be regarded in law as without criminal guilt. For example, self-defense, okay, to prevent a very serious crime such as rape, armed robbery, manslaughter, or murder, or etc. Of course, if you are the victim, for example, if you are a girl, a woman, someone tries to rape you, and in the process, you kill that person, then it is justified as self-defense. Okay? Human life, abortion. So we have discussed this class. Okay? Women's rights argument in favor of abortion. So in the previous slides, we have discussed the abortion as illegal. So at this point, we'll discuss the arguments of women in favor of abortion. So remember, like what I said earlier, there are medical abortions, okay, in other countries. So women have a moral right to decide what to do with their bodies. Okay, that's one of their arguments. The right to abortion is vital for gender equality. The right to abortion is vital for individual women to achieve their full potential. And then banning abortion puts women at risk by forcing them to use illegal abortionists, and the right to abortion should be part of a portfolio of pregnancy rights that enable women to make a truly free choice whether to end a pregnancy. So this class are the feminist view of abortion. Okay. So bodily rights. Many people regard the right to control one's own body as a key moral right. If women are not allowed to abort an unwanted fetus, they are deprived of this right. Okay. However, in the Philippines, the right to life is the highest right. Okay. So the right to life takes precedence over, I don't know, the right to expression. I think that in this discussion, they want to control their bodily rights. So it falls short of the right to life in the Philippine setting. Okay? The simplest form of the women's rights argument in favor of abortion goes like this. A woman has the right to decide what she can and can't do with her body. Okay? The fetus exists inside a woman's body. A woman has the right to decide whether the fetus remains in her body, and therefore a pregnant woman has the right to abort his fetus. Okay? So, as Filipinos class or as a citizen, okay, a citizen in the world, because we have other students also who are foreigners. Do you agree with this view? Okay? For me,
No. Hello.
oh, okay. Yes, yes. What can you say?
Hello,
Do you
Tony.
agree? Yes,
No, doc.
yes.
Yes,
Hello,
attorney.
Tony.
Yeah. Oh, some says no, some yes. Some says yes.
Hello, Tony. I
Okay.
have a question.
Yes. Go
Uh,
ahead.
Tony, if a Filipino woman wants to undergo abortion and she goes to a country where it is legal to undergo abortion, will she face legal action under Article 256, 258, and 259 of Revised Penal Code of the Philippines upon reaching Philippines?
Actually, as there's a what you call in the Philippines, we have what you call jurisdictional jurisdic. Um, as a Filipino, she has committed a crime. Okay, if he goes abroad to commit abortion. However, class in Philippines, we follow the rule on jurisdiction. So the law violated must be violated here in the Philippines. So for purposes, we cannot prosecute the woman. Do you understand, class? Because the crime was committed outside the jurisdiction of the Philippines. Okay? Did you understand, sir?
Yes. Yes, Tony.
Who was
Thank
the one
you.
asking the question? Did you understand, Arjun? Okay. Okay.
Yes,
Thank
Tony.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arjun, for that question. Okay. So let's proceed. Choose life. Okay. For me, class, I of course, I am a staunch supporter of against human trafficking. a staunch supporter of life, being a nurse also with a background of so I support life. So I always choose life. Every human being shall have the right to life and human dignity. The life of the fetus shall be protected from the moment of conception. Okay? So from the moment of conception, life is protected. In the same vein, okay, Article 2 of the 1987 Constitution says in part, under Section 12, the state recognizes the sanctity of family life and shall protect and strengthen the family as a basic, autonomous social institution. It shall equally protect the life of the mother and the life of the unborn from conception. Okay? So the Constitution class is the fundamental law of the Philippines. Okay? All laws must be in consonance with the Constitution. If it is against the Constitution, then it can be declared null and void. Okay? So, no less than the Constitution speaks the protection, okay, of an unborn child. So the act is criminalized by Philippine law, okay, under Article 256, 258, 259. The revised penal code of the Philippines mandates imprisonment for women who undergo abortion as well as for any person who assists in the procedure. But there is a gray area class, okay? Just like what your classmate has asked, if he goes abroad, we follow the rule on jurisdiction. So the crime was committed outside Philippine territory. So we cannot prosecute that. Okay? Article 258 further imposes higher prison from women or parents if the abortion is undertaken in order to conceal his or her dishonor. So there is no law in Philippines that expressly authorize abortion in order to save the women's life. And the general provisions which do penalize abortion make no qualification if the women's life is endangered. It may be argued that an abortion to save the mother's life could be classified as justifying circumstance duress for self-defense that would bar criminal prosecution under the revised penal code. So, it is still a gray area class, okay? So that's why debate has been ongoing ever since in the House of Congress, okay? Now, what are the reproductive rights? Okay, decide freely and responsibly the number, spacing, and timing of their children, and then attain the highest standard of sexual and reproductive health. Meaning you have the right to be physically, mentally, and socially healthy with access to medical, mental, and social facilities and support to exercise your sexual and reproductive rights. Okay? Make a decision production free of discrimination, correction, and violence. So it is your decision whether you have 0 to 4 children. It is our decision whether you undergo sterilization now when you are 50 or not at all. So for reproductive rights class, under there is a law also for reproductive health. It is the decision of the women to exercise these rights. Okay. So even though your children will reach 10 or 20, it's up to you. But for purposes of SSS, okay, what is only covered is the 4th child. Do men have reproductive rights? Of course, we have reproductive rights. The question whether men have reproductive rights is a hotly debated topic. While reproductive rights have been legally recognized as women's rights, especially in matters involving abortion, adoption, and procreation, man's reproductive rights have been less. So even though we have less reproductive rights compared to women, our reproductive right is also existent. Plus, for example, paternity leave, it's a reproductive right. We have the right to what do you call this? We have the right to address the needs of the of the mother of our children. Okay? So there is the paternity leave. Okay? So even though we are not working, we are still paid. Another is the right, what do you call that class? I forgot the term when you, if the man wants to cut the vein
Vasectomy, Doc.
o vasectomy. Okay? So we have the right whether or not to have vasectomy. Okay? So once again, it is a reproductive right for men. Okay? But of course, women are given more preferential rights because of course they are the one who will carry the child. Okay? Their reproductive health must be addressed at all times. Okay? So men's reproductive rights been claimed by various organizations both for issues of reproductive health and other rights related to sexual production. The international issues in men's reproductive health are the following: STDs, very common; cancer, exposure to toxin, and then false paternity. Okay. We also have in law class. We also have rights in filiation, where we can, if in our mind this child does not belong to us, then we can file a case in court, okay, to dispossess this child of the rights. And then reproductive rights of minors. There are also reproductive rights for minors in order to protect them. Women under 18 are entitled to make reproductive decisions concerning their reproductive health. Okay. State laws have restricted their rights and placed burdens on abortion access. As such, many professional organizations concerned with minors' reproductive freedom. Reproductive rights are human rights. It is basic class. Okay? It is part and parcel. Of course, the womb of the mother is the portal of the spirit world. Do you know that, class? Women are very special because your womb is the portal of the spirit world. Because, of course, all human beings has a spirit. So when the egg and the sperm they unite, that's the time when a spirit enters, they say. Because all of us has a spirit. Okay? So the women's womb is a portal, the only portal to the spirit world. So human death, euthanasia, and physician-assisted suicide. So like what I said earlier, it is illegal, okay? Frowned upon by law, abhorred by law, okay? So euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide refer to deliberate action taken with the intention of ending a life in order to relieve persistent suffering. So in the Philippine setting, right to life is the highest right. So even though the person is suffering, okay, so you wait until to his or her natural end. You cannot kill that person. So that's why it's a hot topic again. Euthanasia or mercy killing. In the other country, it is accepted practice. Okay? So euthanasia, a doctor is allowed by law to end a person's life by a painless means as long as the patient and their family agrees. So this is applicable in other countries. But in the Philippines, you will be in prison, class. Okay? The three-pronged liability will attach. A doctor assists a patient to commit suicide if they request it. Once again, applicable in other country. So, voluntary and involuntary euthanasia. So, euthanasia can also be classed as voluntary or involuntary. So, we will just discuss this class. But this is not applicable in the Philippines. This is applicable elsewhere. Okay? So, involuntary when euthanasia is conducted with consent, of course. So, it is voluntary. So, it is in your free will. Voluntary euthanasia is currently legal in Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Switzerland, the state of Oregon, and Washington in the US. Okay? So, not in the entire US, class, only some states Non-voluntary, when euthanasia is conducted on a person who is unable to consent due to their current health condition, in this scenario, the decision is made by another appropriate person on behalf of the patient based on their quality of life and suffering. And then involuntary, when euthanasia is performed on a person who but does not, either because they do not want to die or because they not ask, this is considered as its offense the patient's will. Okay. So this is only euthanasia in other countries because it is considered a crime. Okay. Passive and active euthanasia. So there are two procedural classification of euthanasia. First is the passive euthanasia, is when life-sustaining treatments are withheld. Prescribes increasing doses of strong pain-killing medications such as opioids. This may eventually be toxic for the patient. Some may argue that this is passive euthanasia. Others, however, would say this is not euthanasia because there is no intention to take a life. So when you say passive euthanasia class, this is like overdosing a patient. Okay. So active euthanasia is when someone uses lethal substance or forces to end a patient's life, whether by the patient or somebody else. Active euthanasia is more controversial and it is more likely to involve religious, moral, ethical, and compassionate arguments. Okay? So when you see active euthanasia class, you introduce substances other than the medications, okay, that is lethal to the person. Okay? Assisted suicide, intentionally helping a person commit suicide by providing drugs for self-administration at the person's behest. Voluntary and competent request. Okay? So, maybe it is applicable in other countries, but in the Philippines, it is a no-no. Okay? It is illegal. Now, we will not discuss human subject research class because we will discuss this during our discussion on the Helsinki Declaration, okay? The subject of which is human research subject, okay? So for our discussion today, I think we will end on this note. So I will stop the recording so that you have question, Reina Fe? Question?
Doc, I just want to clarify, the euthanasia procedure is not really applicable or legal in Philippines.
That is correct. In the Philippines, all because of the right to life being the highest right. So all procedure that prevents life, it is illegal. So what are these? Abortion, euthanasia, assisted suicide, and so on and so forth. Okay, Ms. Renafe? Do you have other question, class, with regards to our topic, hot topic? Yes.
Attorney,
Yes.
I still have a question. Applicable lang ba ni say, I mean like, what if attorney, ang pasyente ganahan nang mo give up?
Magdusa siya. Magdusa. Because that is the kuan. That is the controversy. There are many proponents right now who wants to have medical abortion, euthanasia because of the suffering. Okay? However, we stick to absolute justice. We are the highest right to life. So whether or not the patient suffers is not important for because the law is very specific. The law is harsh, but it is the law. Okay? So unless the law is amended, then we can't do anything but to preserve life. But however, Reina Fe, there are accepted practices remember we discussed before the do not resuscitate order. Okay. So when a patient is in arrest or is dying, and the family signs the do not resuscitate order, and then signed by the doctor that there are no medications anymore to prolong the life. So that's the best thing we can do. Okay? Because in euthanasia class, Renafe, it is there is intentional taking of life, which is illegal. Even though the patient is suffering, that is illegal. However, if you will not induce life-saving medication upon request of the family members or maybe the patient, then that is acceptable here in the Philippines because you're not doing something to terminate life. Okay? Do you understand, Renafe?
Yes, yes, attorney. Thank you.
Okay. How about the others? Do you have any clarificatory questions, class? So that your class will be enlightened. Hello? Hello, class? Can you still hear me?
No, no na
Okay.
attorney.
Okay, so with
Hello,
that
Doc.
class, yes.
Can you open the slide number 118?
Slide 118. This one? 118?
Honest, no. 119.
119. This one?
Honesty is there, no, Doc.
Come again?
There is honesty in the slide number 119.
Yes, that is correct.
The healthcare and Doc.
Yes. What is your question?
My question is that sometimes the doctors may not say what the patient is suffering. They will hide their problem.
Yes. Actually, it is an ethical question, an ethical consideration. But in the Philippine setting, you must not withhold. Okay, withhold any information because the relationship between doctors and patient are fiduciary. Okay, based on trust and confidence. So when you say trust, of course, there's an element of honesty. Okay. So that's why open communication is essential. Okay?
Okay. But sometimes docs may not say the answer, no, Doc. They will withhold the situation
Yes.
to the patient.
Maybe some it is the personal preference of course doctors are humans also. Okay? It depends upon their views, their practice, their upbringing. So but these are ethical considerations that you need to face also, Mr. Manoj.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Manoj. Other questions, class? So, so with that, class, I will end the recording so that you can take the. Thank you, class. I will end the recording.
Thank you, attorney.